1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Lay It on the Table, the Southern Board Game Podcast with the accent on Southern. As usual, I am your host, Joe Mahaffey, and once again, I think I'm 5 for 5, James. I'm finally getting the rhythm of how that intro should go.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right on top of it. It's fantastic. Fantastic to hear again.
Yes. And so, boy, I am really excited for this podcast, this particular interview. I've known this person, since before the pandemic, which seems like it should be a long time. But in reality, we were just getting to know each other and each other's families. And then the bad times happened and the pandemic happened. But James, I am very excited to introduce you to my friend, Dr. Megan Connell. She is a certified geek therapist. And since we are the Geek in Southern podcast network, I think that's very appropriate. But she is also a superhero psychologist, and she's got a new book coming out in about 2 weeks called Tabletop Role-Playing Therapy. Megan, welcome to Lay It on the Table.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and it's so good to see you again.
It is so great to see you.
Pandemic.
I've never seen you before at all, so it's really great to see you.
Hello, it's good to meet you too.
So, just a little backstory for the audience. Back in 2018, I think it was, maybe 2018, 2019, I was just starting Ghost of the Salt Marsh as if it were set in Eberron at the friendly local game store, Carolina Tabletop Games, not a sponsor, but we talk about them all the time.
We do.
And you and your husband came in and we were talking about the Beetle and Grimm set that I had. And you were talking about the fact that you were part of Geeks Like Us and that you do a clinical role, which is a bunch of clinical psychologists playing Dungeons and Dragons. I guess it's on Twitch and YouTube. I don't know. I sometimes go in and stalk you guys and make snarky comments. I'm sorry.
Snark is welcome. It's fine.
But it was just the beginning of, as Claude Rains said in that lovely movie, it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. We've been over to your house and played games with you and your kids and all that. And so I am just really excited about the work that you do professionally and how it's culminated in this book. But I'd love for you to talk to us about that journey, sort of what started you and how you got here. And of course, James will have a bunch of, professional academic type of questions that are just beyond me. So we'll go ahead and start there.
Yeah, I know. I've always been a geeky gamer. Loved playing board games as a kid. It's sort of interesting. It was my younger kiddos are getting to the age where they're wanting to know information about me when I was a kid and having to be like, well, I always have loved board games, but nobody ever wanted to play with me. So I often played board games by myself because I was the only child, which is just so sad on many levels. But in middle school, that was when I was first introduced to D&D. I have no idea what edition we were playing because it was, the early 90s. So one person had books and the rest of us had notebook paper that we would write our character sheets on. And it was mostly just making lots of characters and talking about how our characters would know each other. But I don't think we ever played a campaign. We just made characters, as you do.
Yep, I remember those days.
Spent way too long away from the hobby. Got into playing video games, just always reading nerdy books and geeky books. And then it must have been 2016, 2017, got back into playing tabletop role-playing games. I had watched Will Wheaton's Ashes of Valhalla, I think is how you pronounce it, on Geek and Sundry. Rip that channel, I guess. And
Geek and Southern might be inspired by Geek and Sundry if you think about it.
Yeah. It fits. But then we got the Fantasy Age system, started playing it, started watching Critical Role, and we were like, well, D&D, let's give this a try. Got the starter set, played through it as a family. We joined a Sunday night campaign on Roll20 and have been playing every Sunday since January 2017 was when my group started playing. And pretty much every week we're at least talking to each other. Things recently are getting a little more hectic in terms of families and careers and things. So we're not always able to play every week. But we still get together every week at least. And it's great. And yeah, from playing my characters, I started realizing, I was like, wow, these characters tell a lot about me. I wonder if I can use them in therapy. And that's how I got started on this road of using tabletop role-playing games as a part of therapy.
Well, and that's a very interesting thing, because I think when we first met, I think I was curious about the whole Twitch stream, because obviously I had an idea of what I wanted to do. And you and I met for lunch at the Mexican restaurant. Yeah. Over here in Valentine. And we talked a little bit about that. And that's where I really began to grasp how you were using tabletop role-playing game in some of your therapies. And I know that you were working with a lot of minors, and we can't really get too specific there, but I'd love to know how you made that leap into, gosh, this is a way to open up for your particular patients.
Yeah. I ran a few test groups at the practice I was at the time, and started really seeing some positive results. And so then I started running more and more groups, which was awesome. And we had lots of amazing benefit from it. I think using tabletop role-playing therapies, not just Dungeons and Dragons, in my book, I'm very clear about this. Like, I use D&D because I know D&D, and I have a hard time learning new rule sets. So it's what I use. But it's not the best, air quotes around this, therapy game for therapy. It's sort of, what is the game system you want to run and you will enjoy running? That's going to be the, air quotes again, best system for what you want to do. And I found it worked really well with lots of kids. I've tried to run a few adult groups. The problem with the adult groups is, as always with any role-playing game, is scheduling.
Oh yeah.
Getting adults to commit to the same time, the same place for 10 weeks in a row is really hard. So somehow they can get their kids there. They can't get themselves there. So it's a challenge, but it's also really beneficial for them as well.
Well, the thing that I think struck me was, I remember very vividly in that lunch, you were telling me that just watching these young people define their characters and then define the world in which they wanted to exist, and how, if they could think about it, y'all could add it to the story, and how that just seemed to be so empowering to the patient. It was just very impactful on me in the sense that I still carry that conversation with me to this day.
Yeah, it is really cool, because like, so many of these kids came from playing video games where they're just limited. You can customize your character to a certain amount, but like, not really, it's all got to get programmed in. And like, you can interact with the world, but you don't really have a choice in what you're doing. I forget, somebody said this to me. I didn't come up with this one, but so I'm quoting somebody, but now I'm not remembering who. So awesome quote, I guess, is that in video game role-playing games, you are putting yourself into the world of the game. In tabletop role-playing games, you are role-playing a character in the world. And so yourself is kind of coming out of that. And I think that's really powerful. Like, I remember very distinctly playing Elder Scrolls, the Skyrim. And most everybody, I think, has played Skyrim. And there was the first time that a dragon attacked after the opening scene, and I'm just kind of wandering around, and I see a bunch of guards attacking the dragon, and I'm like, they got that. I don't want to fight that. I'm level 2. I don't want any part of the big dragon. I'm going to go back into the city now. And then like, I spent the night in the city and did a couple of quests in the city, and I came out like 3 days later, and the guards are still fighting the dragon. And I'm like, oh, I have to go fight the dragon.
This is
what this. Yeah, it's like, this is what I have to do. And it was very bizarre. And it was like so disappointing, because I had been having so much fun with that game. I still had a lot of fun with Skyrim, and I still really enjoy it and think it's a great game. But like, just sort of that disappointment of like, oh, I can't do what my character actually would want to do. I have to do what the game is telling me to do. And that wasn't fun. And like, in tabletop gaming, we don't have that. We get to do what our characters want. The world gets to be the way we want it. Like, if somebody comes up with this, cool tribe, and it's like, okay, I want the tribe with these, the fish people who have to migrate across the land to different lakes depending on the season. and they have a ritual, and sometimes you have to go out and do things, and it's like, okay, yes, and just finding a way to bring that into the world and to fold that in there, and it's really fun. And like it's so cool to see how much the kids light up when you're just taking their ideas and putting them into the world, even if you don't put them in exactly as they said. Could be taking that idea and just kind of turning it a little bit. Like,
well, it seems to me it's the difference between watching something mediated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going through the screens and you're doing the things, and you're interacting with another human being who can react to you in the way that the sort of brain that another human being has to tell a new story based on whatever insight you have or idea you have, and the computer, the electronic game is not going to be able to do that. And, they're still going to be out there fighting the dragon.
Exactly. And it is so powerful to have that shared narrative experience to go like, I started using, if you're familiar with Sly Flourish's Lazy Dungeon Master.
Yep.
He's got a character bonds thing. So you roll D20. And I started doing this around the group where I had people roll 2 D20s, and they assigned one to the right and one to the left.
Nice.
And that was the bonds that they all had to each other. And the dice were really funny because like somehow like 5 people ended up all being in business together.
That's awesome.
But it made this kind of neat hook. It's like, oh, this is how we know each other. And we're going to bring our business to the world. And this is the reason we're adventuring now.
Well, that's one of the things I love about the game too, is that it's, I was thinking about that episode of The Big Bang Theory where Penny is trying to teach Sheldon improv. And she says, improv is all about saying yes to everything. And I kind of feel like the DM is playing that role of saying yes to what people want to try. They're not always successful,
Mm-hmm.
but because the dice kind of throw into that sense of chance, or there's other variables. But in the game that I play with James, we have a character who she plays this womanizing guy, and she was in this. She was in Kresik because we're doing Curse of Strahd now, and he was successful flirting with this guard. And I'm like, okay, I'm the DM. I got to roll with this. And this was kind of awkward. It's Shane from the store, if you remember Shane from the store, and it's kind of awkward. And we're having this date, and we get to that good night kiss.
Yeah.
And he rolls a 1. And so all of a sudden it's a handshake, but it's all that sort of saying yes to the moment kind of thing, even if it takes you in an uncomfortable place in your relationship. Cause obviously Shane's much younger than me, et cetera. But it was just this whole dynamic of sort of watching that unfold. And it's very funny. Or it's very memorable.
And that thing of like, it stretches you outside of your comfort zone. Right. And like getting to try something new, be something new, it's like, for the first long-term campaign that we played on Sundays, I made a very impulsive character because I tend to be a very meticulous, thinking through, overly anxious person, and I wanted to just hang that up for a few hours. Boy, did my DM punish me for that, but also it was kind of fun, right? And like, it was interesting because playing that character, I got to a point where I'm like, man, am I glad I don't do this in my real life.
Yeah, there's that.
It's just, but it was cool though to kind of have that difference and be like, okay, as much as like we could see the grass is greener and be like, it'd be so nice to be this way, to be able to go, yeah, but you know what? How I am is okay too. And to be accepting of that. There's something really powerful in that moment.
So is that what? How did I have this question somewhere coalescing about how you moved from playing the games to using them as therapeutic, and it was that part of it, like thinking about people can have that, and my students write about this all the time, so I know that there are a lot of other people who work with this as or role playing as this is a way to like either have good socialization moments or to overcome trauma in some way or to connect or to just watch a sort of idealized version or a very different version of themselves go out and do stuff. So I'm curious about how you ended up, pulling tabletop RPGs into therapeutic settings, because it's exciting stuff. But
well, for me, it was I was thinking about the character I had made for the campaign I played with my family, and this impulsive character that I had made with my role playing group.
Which is
I was like, they both came from my brain. They have to have something in common. And when I figured out what they have in common, I had this moment where it was like everything dropped out from under me, and I was like, oh no, that's my central issue that I need to work on. And like, I realized that it was behind all of these defensive walls. And like, I could have done therapy for years and probably never touched on this. And like, even if I had had a therapist who was very insightful and was like, I think your issue is this thing, I'd have been like, no, that's not me. That's not me. But like, because it was these two characters, and I talk about this in my book a lot, and because I think this is something that's very powerful with tabletop gaming, is that it's not us, it's our character. And so because of that, our defenses don't go with it. And so we have this ability to see them as being something other than us, but also they can reflect back onto us. And so I was like, wow, this is really powerful. I need to use this in therapy. And just very serendipitously, that week, Dr. Boca Mazzaro was featured on Dragon Talk, and he was running groups out of aspiring youth to teach kids on the autism spectrum social skills through playing tabletop games. Yep. And so I reached out to him, and he and I have become friends and colleagues. And, we've worked on trainings together and how to use this. And so that's really what got the ball rolling. And then I found my particular niche in this, in running groups for women and girls on learning how to be assertive, assertiveness skills through playing tabletop role-playing games, building positive peer relationships, creative problem solving, and also just having fun for a few hours, which is honestly can be incredibly therapeutic too. And I would say too, for me, like girls has an asterisk after that. Girls is defined as somebody who identifies as being female or identifies non-binary, who was assigned female at birth. But yeah, it's a very welcoming group, and it's just about like talking about some of the challenges that we're going to face in life, and like how do we, what's the armor that we take from the game and bring into the real world. I've talked about this character several times, and I've got to change his name now when I run the game. But his name is Chet, and he is a retired adventurer. And everybody in the town loves Chet because he saved the town several times, and Chet can do no wrong. And Chet smiles. But to the party, so they met Chet, like they just kind of had this passing interaction with him where he's like, "Hello, ladies. You're wonderful. Thank you." And kind of just walked away, and they're all like, "Ugh, gross." And they were sent on a quest, and they had to go clear out the sewers of an infestation that had come into the sewers of this town. And it was a hard slog, and it was gross. And they got to the very last battle, and they're fighting the big boss. And Chet comes into the room, gets the killing blow, and says, "I saved you. You're welcome." And rides off back to town on his steed. Gets there before them to tell everybody in town how he saved the adventuring party.
Like Gilderoy Lockhart meets the Greg Kinnear character of Mystery Men.
Yeah. It was great. And like, he was a character who had a lot of depth, like, and it just was always kind of around. But like they needed to use it because there were times where they needed to get into high political places, and Chet, the hero of the city, had lots of ends. And so they had to figure out how to work with this guy who would not always respect boundaries. Sorry.
Everybody, Megan is recently had a cold, and it's lovely pollen here in the South these days. And so everybody's got their own cough, hack, wheeze. There's been many of that on this program, and we're sorry that you're going through that.
Yes, sorry. I'm trying to spare everyone's ears.
No, thank you. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, but no. So Chet would, not respect their boundaries, not in like a sexual way, but in like he would always call the group ladies, and they're like, "That's not our name. Our group name is this. You will call us this." And he's like, "Sorry, right." And then the next time, ladies. And it's like, Chet, we've talked about this. Right.
I know that guy. Yeah. No.
Yeah. And like most people know that guy, right? And so like how wonderful that the first several interactions with that guy were in a tabletop role-playing game setting where we got to pause the game and talk about that guy and get up on the whiteboard and write out, like, how do we want to deal with this? What do we think the consequences are? What's, and from a psychological standpoint, I'm like, what behavioral outcome do you want to see from this guy? And we talked about, like, the ideal is he has a complete personality change. So, like, what's the likelihood of that happening? Okay, not so much. And so it's like, it really helped them learn how to problem solve those social interactions where when they're dealing with that frustrating person to go, okay, I have to interact with this person and here's what I need from them. I need them to, get this report to me or to get this thing to me, or I need them to work with me to achieve this end.
Right. Or
what
just
behaviors
me as a colleague or as a younger professional, if you're talking with younger women. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we talk about, like, okay, how do we frame things to achieve that behavioral outcome? And that's really helpful. I've had a few of my old players come back to me and be like, I met a Chet. I was like, yeah, they exist. I'm sorry. I wish they didn't, but they do. They're like, I know what to do, but oh my God. And it's such an amazing thing, though, to have these games where we can practice these skills, where we can practice all of these social interactions in a place where we don't have those negative outcomes.
It's kind of funny. Just a slightly going back to, I'll just turn the camera on me for a second because I feel like I want to. No, my dad's a MSW and did a lot of therapy work, and so Joe and I are clearly a little bit older, and when the whole what's the satanic panic was going down on D&D, my dad, who came from this therapeutic background, was like, well, no, role play is fine. Role play is a healthy thing that you should do. Like, I'm good with that. That's part of my training, but not demons. So I was allowed to play other role-playing games, and I knew kids who just weren't allowed to play any at all. Of course, as Joe knows, I went ahead and played D&D in other friends' basements, because that's
what you
do. Yeah. But I didn't end up worshiping Satan at all, so it's good. I feel like that's a bonus. That's it. But it makes sense to me that just thinking, and I love the idea of pausing in the middle of the role play to unpack the role play and say, so now what do we do in a different situation, a real life situation, to deal with Chet because he's going to show up. I think that's fantastic.
So you've got your tabletop role-playing therapy going, and I assume that started after 2017 when you rediscovered D&D, and you begin to see its impact clinically for you as well as playing with your clinical friends. At what point does the book come into your imagination out of your practice?
Yeah, it was something we had been talking on Clinical Role, like a book needs to be written. And I had actually approached a couple other people and asked them if they wanted to do it. Yeah, we're like, somebody has to do it.
One of us.
And all of us were like, I don't think it's going to be me. I don't want to be, and like,
on the nose, yeah.
But I started being like, no, I do want to write this book. I've got, a lot of research. And then just someone from Norton actually approached me and asked and helped me come up with a good outline. And they've been incredibly supportive.
As a former acquisitions editor, were they like listening to the podcasts and watching you? Or
I think so. I think they were aware of me through Twitter and the podcasts and other things that I've been doing. And like, I think it helps in the space. I'm the only one of the psychologists who does this, who's board certified. Only 4% of psychologists are board certified. And so that does carry, some weight with that. And like, I just, to me, having written the book, it's amazing. And it's also kind of this little, moment because I have a language-based learning disability, commonly like would be referred to as dyslexia, but dyslexia doesn't exist in the DSM, but that's the understanding of what it is. So, can't spell very well and have a hard time reading sometimes, but I have still written a book.
What a time to be alive with autocorrect.
Yes, thank you, spell check.
Well, talking about the outline, I mean, that's one of the things that obviously I have not read the book yet because it's not released yet. And although I know where you live, I didn't come steal that copy behind you. But I can
give you a copy. I have extra copy. I'll give you a copy. I have one.
I actually have one. I'll take it, but I have one on order because I feel like you should get paid. I have bought James's books as well. I actually used one in game, and it took him a minute to realize I was reading one of his poems.
I was like, oh, that's a bad piece of poetry. Yeah. Bastard.
The whole time the NPC's going, listen to this droll. But I love the outline in the sense that the book is framed up to say, look, how did we get here? What is this? Why would you use this? Here are some relevant literature pieces that make the case to just show you I'm not somebody just pushing my wares here. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of give us all of that, the foundation up front. In fact, I think you call it the foundation if I'm reading it correctly with my old eyes up here in the corner of my screen. And then you get into the application of it. And I think that, one of the reasons I know James was excited about this book because I think he's thinking about how he can use it in the classroom. I'm thinking about how just it is from a, before and after an application standpoint, not only as somebody who plays the game, but plays the game with a lot of diverse people, either in a one shot or the people that I'm playing with that are friends or what have you. And I'm always looking for something to just sort of stretch my brain, but in this field. And I love just sort of how you organized it. And was that collaboration with your editor, or did you kind of know going into it, you wanted to kind of lay the foundation first?
I knew I wanted to lay the foundation. It was sort of, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, my editor was like, I don't think you really need to do this, but if you want to, go for it. I was like, no, I think it's important. Because in grad school, it was really drilled into me to operationally define everything, which is, when I say role-playing game, what do I mean by that? Right? Like you have an idea, the listeners have an idea, but like, what do we actually mean? And so taking the time to define the terms, define what we're talking about here, and really to break it down, because Norton was really like, this is going to be a textbook. I'm like, cool, but I also want it to be readable by people who are not academics, because these games make people feel things and they want to understand why. And that's what I really hope that I want this to be this lovely bridge that unites psychology in the gaming world, where it's just like psychologists meet gamers, gamers meet psychology. You both have a lot in common, and let's try to work together and to create some amazing things here. Because I am so fascinated by how we encode D&D or, tabletop gaming memories, right? Because when we're talking about the things our characters do, we don't frame it in my character did this thing, right? We frame it in I did this thing. I stormed the castle. And remember, you tried to climb up and you had to kick through the window and you knocked that guard off. And there was the Wilhelm scream as he fell. And then we had this, it's this thing where it feels like a real memory. And that's, part of the big power of role playing is it does give us these lived experiences. And so even though we didn't go and fight a dragon at the castle, it can feel like we did. And that does something for us. And so talking about the narrative stuff behind that and the science behind that and what's going on in our brains, I think I'm interested in it. I hope other gamers are too.
I think that's really fascinating because in a slightly more, I guess, banal version of this, it's the ways that we can talk about vampires or the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus as if they're real. Mm-hmm. We can talk about who's the strong, I see these conversations who's the strongest Marvel universe, it's none of them. They're not there, but we can do this. We can engage these fictional, and that's the power. I mean, I'm a writer, right? So I think about the power of poetry because that's my jam. But my wife is a fiction writer, right? And we talk about these as if these happened. But then building those stories with other people, it's a really astonishing thing and I think this is one of the beautiful things about tabletop games regardless, right? As opposed to a lot of digital games where you don't know who everybody is, and it's all of these, but you're sitting there across a table and you create these stories around. It's not exactly a text, right? It's a game that you've pulled together, and then you'll tell these stories for years. And those narratives that come out of that, are just fantastic. And so one of the things I was also interested in is you also work with, my dad's a veteran. I have friends who are veterans, and so you've pulled this into not just women and girls in gaming, but you also do work with veterans. Is that right?
I'm trying to do work with that. So I'm a vet myself.
Okay.
I was in the Army. I've been trying to get a veterans group together. I was getting close to it, and then the pandemic hit. And now I left the practice I was at to open up my own practice here in Charlotte called Health Quest. And so when we open our doors at our main location this summer, probably in the fall, I'm going to be really doing a heavy push to try and get the veterans group going. Because it's something I feel very passionate about. And I just think it's cool too for vets because like you don't get to use your tactical knowledge once you leave the military. And like making a highly tactical game, Matt Colville's got I've got all the books he's put out so far, and he's a very tactical player and gives some wonderful guidelines. It's like, okay, let's get some tactics on. Let's do this. And let's let you flex those muscles that you built in the military, and have your group behind you, and get to go and fight and feel like a hero.
Well, and that's fantastic. When I was looking at all of doing a bit of research, my dad went into the VA. That was like his final, that's what he wanted to do at the end of his career, was to give back and to engage and help other vets. And so that was really nice to read that. And I was really excited to hear about what that meant for you. So, yeah.
It's interesting as I listen to this, sometimes I love it when we have a guest, because sometimes I talk too much or interrupt, or I get to be the spectator. In this case, I'm being the spectator. James is amazed at how little I've interrupted, but I have my own social quirks. I think Megan knows that. But it just seems to me, when I think about the whole tabletop role play experience, we all talk about it as if, Lord Gygax pulled it out in 1976 and bequeathed it to the world. But the reality of it is, if I were an anthropologist, I'd say, no, we've been sitting around the fire telling stories to each other, for millennia. And I think that that is an interesting expression of the format. And I've just been curious about how the pandemic has really been the fuel for that, in the sense that it wasn't that people were looking for something to do. They were craving community. They were craving this human interaction, even if you had to do it through this type of, modality to do that. And I think that, James and I talked to Professor Dungeon Master from Dungeon Craft. I'm going to get that right. I wanted to say Dungeon. I was going to say Dungeon Quest, and I knew that was wrong. Dungeon Craft. Thank you, Professor Dungeon Master. We really appreciated you coming on our show. But he talks a lot about that too, about that guy and just sort of, and in real life, he's a teacher and he's doing some very similar things, but it's just sort of interesting to me, as we talk to him about the whole Hasbro thing and what I think Hasbro really lost sight of, and this is really my point before I blew the whole Dungeon Craft thing, is that I don't think they appreciated that what they see as a game, as a business, was this innate need for us to have community and share a story together, and that you have had the opportunity to take that a step further and draw things out of ourselves that we can learn about ourselves and kind of see that in the mirror a little bit. Because I have this, my own personal experience is that when you understand something about yourself, then you're in a position to do something about it.
Yes.
I say you're either a victim or you're a volunteer. And I always say you're a victim until you're intellectually aware of what you have, and then you choose to be there. Right or wrong, that's my perspective on it. And I think that this is just another, the fact that you found a way for that to be a way for people to discover things about themselves in a relatively safe environment.
Yeah.
You know, you're surrounded by friends. You have this catharsis. Maybe you're having it privately at the table, but you're at a table with friends.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is just so powerful.
Well, and there's a story. I share this story a lot because, like, I had moments where I knew that what I was doing was helping and was making a difference. And this was the first moment where, like, it hit me so hard. So this was my first, like, real, like, long meeting group for I call it applied gaming, with therapeutic gaming. And we had been doing sort of a modified Rise of Tiamat story. Modified being in, like, the only thing that was in common was there was a dragon cult trying to bring Tiamat to the material plane. And that was about where the parallels between the module ended. But the players figured out who was doing it. There was a green dragon who was pretending to be a gnome running around. They gathered their allies, to include Chet, together in the royal stables, because it was a stone-sided building with a roof. And they cornered the gnome in there, and they transformed into the dragon, and the building was big enough to hold the dragon, and it couldn't fly away. And they all attacked, and the rogue was the one who got the killing blow. And, you know, I described it like this, like, you know, I was like, okay, how do you want to do this? And the rogue's like, I'm just so tired, and this battle's gone on for so long. I think I'm just going to kind of half swing up and, you know, get my dagger. And so, like, so I kind of, you know, embellished it. And I was like, and then the dragon falls, and all of a sudden the table just erupted in tears. And the group they all ran together, and they were sobbing. And I, like, had this moment of, like, oh, frick, what did I do? What did I do? What's going on? What's going wrong? And I was like, are you guys okay? What's going on? And one of them finally, like, calmed down enough, was like, look at what I can do when I'm with my friends.
Oh,
I
that's
was
amazing.
Like, oh, right? I still get chills thinking about that moment.
Wow.
It was so powerful. And so where I was like, okay, this is something. Like, here's this moment where, and I should say, sorry.
It's okay.
The dragon had been bullying them. Like, in real life, a lot of these people have been bullied. And so to be able to be like, no, I'm not going to stand up, you know, I'm going to gather my allies, and we're going to confront this all together. And it was just so amazing.
Oh, wow.
That does sound amazing. And those moments are just so special.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely a privilege to witness those and to be like, yes, okay, this is something really special here.
So it's interesting hearing these stories, because, you know, James and I have been doing this podcast for coming up on a year. It'll be a year next month.
Woot.
Woohoo.
And how many classes have you done at Furman on this, James?
Have we done? This is I mean, it's the same. This is my third semester teaching doing that.
And there's
writing around tabletop games. Yeah.
And it's always exciting because James will always have a story each semester about that one student that, you know, comes in like, I don't want to play games. And then they get it, and they open up to it because they hear games and they think, oh, it's Monopoly.
Oh, it's going to be easy.
And then James walks in with a game called Dude, you know, and it's just a different.
Dude is a very fun game.
Ooh.
Different experience. But anyway, so it's just kind of interesting for me to kind of, you know, there's a commonality in what he's experiencing in the classroom and what you experience in the clinical setting.
Well, and one of the things that I want them to understand is that games are exactly what they think they are. And they just haven't dived deep enough to think through it, right? And to think through the experience and think through what it means to create these stories, and to recognize that, you know, if you're uncomfortable with one kind of gaming, it's okay to say, like, yeah, I don't really like zero-sum games. I like, and to give them the language to talk about that, and to recognize that games have been around since as long as we've been human. And to sort of try to think about them as more serious. Well, they are more serious than we think they are, because they're so core to who we are as being human beings. And And we kind of, particularly in a sort of capitalist, we must do stuff to make money. They don't make money, right? They're a thing that you do with friends to connect, to explore these stories. So yeah, it's fun to watch that change.
Well, I grabbed my book because there's a person, sociologist Johann Huizinga had this Huizinga, that he says that we should be called Homo laden, meaning man the player, because every civilization has games. And gaming
I have Homo ludens over there on the shelf. So yeah,
there we go. Yeah, see, we've read all the same books.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But like that, it's so interesting to me. Like a study I pull out a lot is it's entitled Alibis in Play. I'm forgetting. It starts with a D. Is the author of it? Sorry,
it's all good.
It's talking about like this idea that as adults we need to have an alibi in order to justify our ability to play. Right? It's like I'm not really playing Little League. I'm on my team, like my company's team, and it's like for team building and morale. I'm not actually playing. And it's so interesting because like the more status you have in not necessarily like, money, but like, positional authority, the bigger the threat is of playing. And so like, one of the things I talk about is like, if you're going to be the psychologist in the room, you have to play. You cannot observe. You cannot just be there to help with the behaviors. Certainly you can hire a professional game master to run the game for you. But if you're in that room, you're playing an NPC. You're going to play the friendly animal companion to the adventuring party.
But don't
like, because if well, it's like, if you don't model play, nobody else in that room is going to play. Nobody's going to feel like it's okay to actually play and take that risk. And so we've got to do that and be willing to play. Like I had another psychologist reach out to me at one point being like, I want to use this, but I don't actually want to play the game. Like, no, this isn't going to work then. Like you've got to be willing to get in there with the clients and to do this stuff.
Well, it's funny you couch it that way because I got back into gaming just before I met you. So it was a 2018, 2017 timeframe. And I had been away from D&D since I knew James in college. And I think one of the things
in 1903.
Yes, 1903. Yes.
Just to date ourselves a little bit.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Jerk. Do you do couples therapy? But I tell people that when I went to my high school, my 30th high school reunion at the age of 48, I looked around and saw for the first time that since we'd graduated, we were all comfortable in our own skin again. And it didn't matter what your title was, and it didn't matter who you married or where you worked or blah, 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 blah. It was like we were back in school again, and the things that had us in common, And what I've discovered is that I would tell people, I feel like I'm the most comfortable in my own skin as I've ever been. And now I take that forward into this whole gaming hobby because I lean into it. And, I'll go to work and say, hey, I lead a Dungeons and Dragons group. And I've been surprised at how many people are drawn into that because they go, oh, well, I'd like to play that, or I've always wanted to play that, or I play that too. Whatever the different answers are to that. And I'm finding that, the more that you just kind of say, I'm the board game guy. In fact, if you look at all my socials now, I make no secret to that. And I was just up in Washington recently for the cancer advocacy that I do. And gaming was a big part of the discussion with different people that I was meeting from all over the country, whether they were sitting on the political side of the table, which we were meeting with some politicians, or the people that were in our groups that were doing it. And so I'm finding that I don't know if it's always just sort of been a universal language as your Hazung, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the guy's last name.
Yeah,
thank you. Would suggest, or if it's this idea that we're just rediscovering it. But to me, I don't know if I could have done this and gotten as much out of it in my 30s, perhaps, just speaking for me, of the generation I am of. I don't know. Maybe that's too.
Well, no, I think there is truth in like as we get older, we stop caring so much about like, it's not that like we don't care what other people think completely, because of course like we always do a little bit. You can't live in society if you don't at all.
Right.
But like it's just like, yeah, I'm not going to apologize for being me and loving the things that I love. Like that's one of the things I love about the media company I co-founded, Geeks Like Us. We define being a geek as being unapologetically enthusiastic. And like when I was posting about the Willow series on the Geeks Like Us Discord, and like I caught myself because I was like, I started off with, I'm sorry, I'm going to gush about this series. And I was like, nope, not sorry. This is unapologetic. I just get to gush. I am so heartbroken that Willow got canceled too for the second and third season. Like it was so terrible. It was good. Like it did it. It did it. It crossed it. It was so bad. It hit good again. And honestly, like if you watched Willow and you frame it in your head as this is a D&D campaign, and all they did was they took a transcript of them playing and they made a TV show out of it. It makes so much sense then.
And the first movie, the Willow movie, is pretty bad, but it's just wonderful. Yeah.
It's wonderfully bad. Yeah. And I think the TV show captured that. And like, I love the character of Morgan. I wanted to see his origin story so much. But yeah.
And to jump up on Joe's comment, it does seem like anytime I'm willing to say, oh yeah, I play a lot of board games, people will wander up and say, oh my God, yeah, I do this all the time. And I just don't feel like, yeah, I'll be the guy who will say it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really powerful. And you can walk in and be like, okay, yeah, these games, I love these games. I love this stuff. And this is cool. And here's what, like I just, I built my first Pokemon deck the other week. So
that's awesome. What my students are supposed to write a game journal every week, just sort of because they're writing more formal writing, but then I also have them do a weekly informal writing. And I have one of my students who is a dedicated Pokemon player. And so his game journal every week is like, he'll talk about he'll go to a little game shop around here and he'll have his little, he'll see how his deck does in 5 or so, meets, I don't know what. And then he'll at the end of his journal, he'll have the list of the deck, so it'll be, this was the deck. I'm like, all right, man, I didn't need to know that, but that's awesome. Like, I love that you're like, I can share this. And
that is so cool. And
I'm like, now I want to, try some Pokemon because it's like, it seems like a great little game. So
my kids are really into it. I felt bad. My youngest it was actually really cute. I came down one day and we have a bunch of gaming mats and stuff. And she had a gaming mat set up and her deck set up and was sitting there at the table. It's like, are you ready to play? And I'm like, I don't have a deck.
Right, Mom.
I am delighted that you want to play against me, but I do not have a deck. So I've rectified that. And like, but she got a new deck Pokemon did something cool. They had like the World Championship in London a couple years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And they did special packets that are the decks of the winners.
Ooh.
So she has a winning deck. So I'm going to have to play against that.
Good luck, Mom.
Yeah. Good luck with that. I've played against that individual. I know how ruthless that can be.
Yes.
Just not a Pokemon. So the book is coming out in about a week. It's a week from tomorrow.
Just over a week. Yeah, a week from tomorrow. Yeah.
That's exciting. 28th. And so what do you have on the docket? I mean, do you have other podcasts, other places you're going to be, things you're going to be doing?
Yeah, I've done a few other podcasts. I keep trying to book some signings at Barnes & Noble. I'm actually going to be at the other friendly local game store that we have in South Charlotte over at Mint Hill. It's actually called your
local game store. Yep.
Store.
We like them too.
On April 1st, I'll be doing an event there. So I'm going to be doing a Q&A and signing, and then after running a short game. I'm hoping my cough will be good up by then. So.
Well, that is awesome. In fact, I was in Carolina Tabletop Games, and I saw that Rob had put a stack of your cards right there at the cash register.
Yes.
And we're working on a tabletop day in May, where we're going to be playing. We're going to have a number of game masters. Christina Stiles from Christina Stiles Presents, who's a publisher, who lives down in Rock Hill. She's going to be running she's going to be play testing some things that she's done.
Oh,
and
nice.
we're going to do a few different things there. So that would be, that'll be in May, but I know that'd be cool if we could get you to come in there at some point in time. I'll get with
I'll be
Rob
there.
on
I'll
that.
come.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm trying to do something at Carolina Table, but they are so busy. Like
Rob,
they're having good problems.
Yeah. He's up 40%. And, it's cause he got, it's a magic moment. Magic. He's got a lot of magic cards going on in there. He got certified. So, or what do you call that? Is they're officially anointed or whatever. Anyway, I don't play Magic, so I can't say much about it, but you know, I find other ways for him.
I got
to
a
take
targeted
my money.
ad on Reddit today for Hot Pockets Magic the Gathering Arena Edition.
I've seen those. Oh my gosh. I have seen those. There is a Canadian YouTuber that does nothing but magic. The Magic Historian. You should check him out. He's very funny. And he's been talking a lot about those Hot Pockets, but that's great. So you ready to go get some and serve them to your kids as you're out?
Oh my
schlepping
God.
the book.
It was sort of this thing of like, wow, what is this world? Oh my gosh. Like, and then also like for the follow-up thing of like Wizards of the Coast, there's better ways for you guys to make money.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, James and I have talked a lot on this show about sort of the cyclical nature of that business and the mistakes that they don't seem to learn from. But, you know, it doesn't really matter. The games continue and the people continue. And, you know, we'll sort of see how that all sorts out. I hear that Wizards of the Coast has invited a number of influencers to come to Seattle soon to have this big hubbub. And of course, James and I would not have been invited. We're not large enough, but even Professor Dungeon Master did not get invited. Ooh. He did a whole episode about it.
Yeah, I wasn't invited. I am gonna be on Dragon Talk this week too.
Okay.
So
cool.
That's awesome.
I'm doing that little podcast. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
please tell them please talk about us on that podcast and send people our way. Please. I'll get you as
Greg and Shelley are so nice.
I'll get you as Zapata's gift card.
Oh, that's tight. This is the best Mexican restaurant I've been to in a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Well, that's just good. I'm just really, you know, on the one hand, I'm so grateful that you were willing to have a conversation with us, but on the other hand, knowing you, I'm very proud of you. This is just so amazing to see.
Thank you.
The things that that initially inspired me about you, to see that coming out in a way that other people can experience it, even though they don't live here. And I just think that's awesome.
Thank you so much. No, this is awesome. And it's really funny. Like one of my kids today is like, I didn't realize until today that you're an author, Mom. Yeah. That book with my name on it. I wrote that.
Well, when I get my copy, I want a signature on mine. So
you
I
got
gotta
it.
find you. So
yeah, I'm gonna try. So, to anybody who does listen in Charlotte, I did get permission from the Barnes and Noble over at what's the South Charlotte Barnes and Noble? Not
Carolina Place Mall.
No, not that one. The other
South
one.
Park.
At nope.
Arboretum.
Arboretum. The Arboretum Barnes and Noble.
Yeah,
I'm
Providence.
doing such a great job advertising.
Providence.
So good.
Providence and Pineville Matthews Highway. The Arboretum.
Yep.
Yep.
Arboretum. So I'm trying to book an actual like event there, but that's getting hard. But they did tell me I can come in and sign all the books. So I'm going to bring a D20 in as well, and I'm going to roll it on the book, and I'm going to put the number that I roll. So if you get one of those that's got the number and the signature, that's what I rolled on the book.
Yeah, you'll roll a one on mine, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Well,
I'm very excited about that.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we're so grateful that you came on with us today. So James and I have a tradition. We always like to talk about what is on the table. We talk about board games that we may have played in the last few weeks. And looking at the list, I can see that he and I both have a very short list. But before we kind of jump into ours, what's on your household table right now besides Pokemon?
Well, actually, right, but we when we sit down to dinner, we actually always try to play a card-based game. We've played a lot of Geek Out. That is a very big game at my house. But recently, my kids have gotten old enough to understand how to play Super Fight, and so that has been played a lot.
What is Super Fight?
Super Fight. It is so awesome. You draw a fighter who can be like, usually it's a pop culture reference. Like we have the 90s deck, like my first fight was the Rugrats. And then you get 2 attributes. And so the judge draws a person and draws an attribute and draws another attribute. So like I had the Rugrats who had a samurai sword and were like squirting acid out of their eyes or something.
Ooh.
And then everybody else has a hand. Yes. And they choose a hero from their hand and an attribute, and then they assign an attribute to the player next to them. The judge, in our case, we decide right or left where you're going to pass. And then you argue and debate about who would be the best fighter, who would win.
Got it.
So this shrink wrapped copy of Super Fight came in a loot crate that I got years ago. I've never opened it.
Oh, it's fun. It is really fun. I highly recommend that.
Well,
we also played.
You have 3 players or so to do that.
3, yeah. We've got there's 5 of us at the table, and that's a pretty good group. But we played Dwellings of Everdell with some friends, that's a worker placement game. It's okay. Like my husband is very, very good at understanding, like thinking 4 turns ahead. I am not. So I tend not to do so well in those games. But yeah, we played that one. That was pretty good. We have almost Dominion just came out with a new expansion. So all but the newest expansion to Dominion, we play that a lot too.
Oh, wow. That's a big stack of cards.
Yeah.
Do you play other deck builders or really just all Dominion all the time?
No, I really, really like the Harry Potter Battle for Hogwarts game.
Oh, yeah.
If you guys have not played that one, I highly recommend it. It's actually 7 games in one.
Right.
It's really well done. I've started playing it with my youngest but I'm having a rule that they have to finish each book. And then when they finish the book, we can play because like there's spoilers in the deck if you haven't read the books. And so they're slowly making their way through the series and playing that one. There's another deck builder that I played too. Well, Pokemon's a deck builder, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. I would call it a deck battler, but yeah.
Yeah, deck battlers is a good one. Another one that we got recently. Well, of course, we've got Everdale, which I really like, and My Little Everdale is awesome for kids, and also awesome if you want to play Everdale, but you don't have 90 minutes.
Yep.
It's really good. And then we also have the Marvel Dice Throne, which is a lot of fun.
Okay. Is that just how does that one work?
It's Yahtzee with a couple more steps.
There you go. Okay.
Yep.
That tracks. Yeah, we find that there's typically a lot of similar ideas just executed thematically in different ways.
Like literature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So James knows this. A couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were up in Durham, or Durham, as I like to say. And I never miss an opportunity to go into Atomic Empire when I'm up there. I just am fascinated by that store as well.
It's a great game. It's game store.
It's
huge.
One of my favorites. Anyway, they actually had a copy of Hickory Dickory, which we had read about, 3-4 months ago. And I thought it was going to be a Kickstarter, but evidently it just came out. And so we picked it up, and it was a little bit of a curve to get into it.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Rodney Smith, and everybody at Plaid Hat Games for your lovely, helpful videos. And we are just really intrigued by this thing, and we've played it 3 times now. Dale, my wife, has beat me twice. I finally just won tonight. But the thing I love about
congratulations.
Well, there's just you know how Lost Ruins of Arnak, there's a bunch of different ways that you can get your number at the end. It's got that feel to it. Mm-hmm. And they describe it as almost like if you need to think like you're almost in a relay race with your mice around the clock. And it's very true. It takes a minute for your brain to kind of get used to how this goes. But what I really like about it is, James has heard me say this a million times, and Megan, I think I said this to you when Dale and I first came over to y'all's house. Dale and I like games where you don't have to be mean to each other to win.
Oh yeah.
And it can fit that criteria. You can be mean to each other, but you don't have to be. which is nice. But the other thing I like about it is every time we've played, our scores have been within 5 to 12 points of one another, which tells me there's some balance to it. No one runs away with it. And you think you're losing, and then all of a sudden certain mechanics kick in, and all of a sudden, holy cow, you've just surpassed everybody and you're 20 points ahead. And then you get it to the end and you're like 5 points ahead. And it's just really, but to me, that's exciting because it's just the whole mechanic of the game. And once you get into the rhythm of it, it's like, okay, I'm into it now. And so we've been really enjoying that. So that's taken up our time when I wasn't in DC. James, what about you? I see you have 2 on the list here.
I have 2. So one that I've been playing a couple of times with just with Laura, and then when Sky was here, is Pessoa, which is, and I love the theme of this game. Do either of you know Fernando Pessoa?
Mm-mm.
No, you shouldn't necessarily.
So.
Early 20th century Portuguese poet. And so, which is probably why you don't know who Fernando Pessoa is. But he's kind of the high watermark for modernist literature in Portugal. And the interesting thing about Pessoa is that from an early age, which might have been triggered by some trauma, his father died when he was 5, and his younger brother died the next year, and his mother remarried the year after that. It was
wow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a string of stuff happening for young Fernando. And so he created these kind of alternate versions of himself that he called heteronyms. So not like a pseudonym where you just write your stuff, but you just sort of use a different name. He created entire personalities around them. He got into astrology. He had astrology charts for all of them, had histories. They all wrote in different styles. And then he would write from their perspective to different magazines and newspapers, and they would get into fights, like different versions of himself, fighting literally and putting each other down. It's fascinating. But so Pessoa is, in fact, a worker placement game where all the possible workers are all the time going around. So if you're playing it 2-player, the other 2, it plays up to 4, are sort of robots that are moving around. But you always have the option of playing Pessoa's orthonym, he called it, himself. And you can always kind of take it over from somebody else and move it where you want to go and take that action. It's an interesting little game. It does not do well at 2. 3, it starts to be interesting. 4, you always want to play it with 4 players. So that was... Okay.
That sounds like a Vita Lacerda game.
But it's so
smaller.
It's so short and small. That's the other thing about it, is that you're just trying to get to these materials to write poems. And it's about... If you're doing it right, it seems like it's a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. So not Vita Lacerda where you're going to be sitting down for 2 hours to do this. It goes very quick.
There's just there's a character in Weather Machine that sounds a lot like the Pessoa character. That's why I was thinking that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And then just a really small little box called Songbirds came out, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I don't remember. I can check. But we drove up to Athens, Ohio for the Appalachian Studies Association conference with Sky, my 14-year-old, and Emerson, who's 21 months. And so we had to put Emerson to bed. And then the 3 of us, Laura and I and Sky, were like, well, so now what are we going to do? We're exhausted. Well, here's this little game, Songbirds. And it's a little box and just cards. And you've got an imaginary 5x5 grid that you're kind of playing into, and as different grids fill in, different colors of birds are potentially scoring, and the last bird in your hand is the color bird that you're going to score. So there's this tension between what do I play down, what do I get other things to score if I don't have the right bird at the last time. So the first 2-3 times around the table, you're like, yeah, I'll play down whatever. And then the game, it's one of those ones where it kind of slows down. We're like, oh no, wait, what have I done? So it was super cute. And it's a nice, there's a lot of good choices and decisions to be made in a very small box, and it's still pretty light, but it feels really satisfying to play. So that was the other thing we had on the table. Yeah.
Well,
And
if
you've
you
got youngins, it plays well because it's really simple about you just play the bird, and it's
That's cool. Well, I got to give one more recommendation too of a game I got at PAX Unplugged called Boop. It is.
Yes.
Have you played it?
Is this the cats on the
Cats on the bed?
Cats on the bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is so fun. It's very funny because my kids love to play it, and then my husband and my son were like, "Oh, this seems silly," and then they got into a very intense game of Boop.
Well, it's kind of an abstract area control game, right? But dressed up as cats on the bed. Yeah.
Yeah. You have kittens on the bed, and then you get 3 kittens in a row, and they graduate to cats, and the cats can stare kittens, but the kittens can't stare cats, and
that I have a daughter that we give cat games to, so that sounds like the one to get for her. She doesn't listen to this podcast, so she'll still be surprised.
Yeah, it's a what do they call it? Laughter or Smirk and Dagger, but they're Smirk and Laughter.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what they call their funny games.
Songbirds and Boop, Joe, and that's the one eats the other. It's
I have this thing about wanting to play Wingspan Isle of Cats in parks where the cats are chasing the birds into the parks. A big marathon where you play all 3 games at once, where you play around, come back. I'm weird. I'll just leave it there. Well, that's what's been on our table this week. Again, we want to thank Dr. Megan Connell for coming on Lay It on the Table this week. We certainly appreciate it. We ask that you follow us at layitontheTable.show. And if you're so inclined, please go to Apple Podcasts or somewhere else and leave us a like or leave us a little blurb there about us. You can actually do it on our website. You can also find us on Lay It on the Table on Board Game Geek, where we have an area there. And of course, on YouTube at the Geek and Southern channel. And as always, I am Joe Mahaffey. I am not bored. I am board gaming.
And I'm James Engelhardt, hoping that all your tiebreakers break your way.
1, 2, 3, 4.